First at 9 this Friday, the 12th of July 2024. Constitutional concerns. Another petition filed before the Supreme Court seeking to postpone the presidential election. Petitioner claims 19th Amendment reducing president's tenure to 5 years was not properly passed in Parliament. Parliamentary probe. Committee on Public Finance recommends a forensic audit of the controversial online visa procurement process. Justice Minister warns legal professionals to not take the judiciary lightly. Time for change. Another economic crisis imminent if Sri Lanka's economy is not transformed within the next decade, asserts President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is Ada Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Ada Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Singh joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now, in your top story this evening, another fundamental rights petition has been filed before the Supreme Court seeking an order to prevent the holding of a presidential election, highlighting that the 19th Amendment to the Constitution has not been passed properly in Parliament. The petition filed by Attorney at Law has named the Election Commission and its members, the Secretary General of the Parliament and the Attorney General as its respondents. Through the petition, the petitioner requested that the Supreme Court issue an order to the General Secretary of Parliament to take steps to refer the 19th Amendment of the Constitution to a referendum. On the 8th of July, a petition filed by entrepreneur C.D. Lenever seeking an order preventing the calling of a presidential election was dismissed by the Supreme Court. Delivering the verdict of the petition, the five-member judge bench presided over by Chief Justice Jayantha Jayasuriya held that the Constitution clearly limits the president's tenure to 5 years in office. While referring to two petitions filed against the 19th Amendment in 2015, the Supreme Court judge bench further held that petitions cannot be filed against a law that was passed by Parliament, since the Parliament passed the amendment after making necessary adjustments to the draft bill pursuant to the Supreme Court determination. The bench added that the petitioner was late in seeking assistance from the Supreme Court. Additionally, the court ordered the petitioner to pay a court fee of 100,000 rupees within a month for wasting the court's time. Against such a backdrop, a new petition was filed before the Supreme Court seeking an order to prevent the holding of a presidential election. Filed by Attorney at Law Aruna Laksiri, the Election Commission and its members, the Secretary General of the Parliament and the Attorney General have been named as respondents. The petition argues that the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was not properly passed in Parliament and therefore calls for a referendum to ensure its proper passage. The petitioner further asserts that a presidential election facilitated by the Election Commission would violate the supreme law of the land since the 19th Amendment has not been properly passed. The petitioner requested that the Supreme Court issue an order to the General Secretary of the Parliament to take steps to refer the 19th Amendment of the Constitution to a referendum.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
Meanwhile, the fundamental rights petition filed before the Supreme Court seeking an order preventing the holding of the presidential election was discussed in Parliament today. Independent parliamentarian Dalla Salha Peruma describes this move as an attempt to destabilize the nation against a backdrop where the Election Commission will soon be empowered by law to call the presidential election. Justice Minister, President's Counsel Dr. Vijaydasu Rajapaksa is of the view that the public and lawyers should not jest with the judiciary. Meanwhile, with regard to the controversial online visa procurement process, Chairman of the Committee on Public Finance, Dr. Harsha De Silva, who tabled the report in Parliament today, calls for a forensic audit of the entire procurement process.
Breaking news එකක් විදියට දැන් මොහොතකට පෙර ආවා 19 වෙනි ව්‍යවස්ථා සංශෝධනය.
There is some breaking news that another fundamental rights petition has been filed before the Supreme Court seeking an order preventing the calling of a presidential election. The petitioner asserts that since the 19th Amendment was not subjected to a referendum, any presidential election held before such a referendum violates the Election Commission. In another 4 days, the Election Commission will be empowered by law to call the presidential election. As that fateful day draws closer, attempts are being made to destabilize the nation.
We enacted the 19th Amendment in 2015 after obtaining the public mandate. The Supreme Court, as the country's apex judicial authority, interprets the constitution while vesting the sovereignty of the public at the center of its concern. In relation to the 19th Amendment, the Supreme Court delivered a verdict stating that President, upon the completion of his 5-year term, is unable to remain in office even for a single day. That verdict is applicable to a successor president and a head of state elected by the people. The Supreme Court has delivered 3 judgments, ruling that the Constitution clearly outlines the tenure of the President. However, it has now come to a point where people are trying to create a mockery out of the judiciary while misleading the public's curiosity. Recently, a person who is said to have come from Uzbekistan filed a petition stating that an ambiguity has been created regarding the duration of the President's term in office. However, the judiciary expressed their displeasure and dismissed the petition. Attorneys who claim to be well versed in the law shamelessly file petitions before the judiciary. They also argue and seek court orders. I also received an alert that an attorney named Laksiri has filed a petition arguing that the term of the President is 6 years and that the 19th Amendment has not been passed by a referendum. Members of the public and attorneys should not jest with the judiciary. As parliamentarians, we should not remain in office when our term ends.
අපිට අවුරුදු 5කට නම් පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ බලය දුන්නේ අපි අවුරුදු 5කට වැඩිය දවසක්වත් ඉන්නේ නැහැ.
රජයේ මුදල් පිළිබඳ කාර්ය සභාවෙද යොමු කරන ලද
I hereby present the report on the issuance of visa through an online system established by the Department of Immigration and Emigration in collaboration with another entity. According to the executive summary of the report, even though it was claimed that the visa issuance was handed over to VFS, the name of the prime contractor is a company named GBS Technology Services and IVS Global FZCO. VF Worldwide Holdings has joined those entities. The prime contractor is another company, not VFS. All 3 companies have signed agreements and their information is mentioned in the annexures. The committee is of the view that the absence of a competitive bidding made it difficult for the Department of Immigration and Emigration to select the best and most reasonable offer. Had there been competitive bidding, a $25 fee which includes a service fee of $18 and a $7 convenience charge could have been reduced further. The cabinet paper mentioned that the company will be investing $200 million. What we found out was that there was no mention of such an investment anywhere. The opinion of the committee is that it is necessary to conduct a broad forensic audit.
පුළුල් වෝහාරික විගණනයක් සිද්ධ කර යුතුයි කියන එක තමයි කාර්ක සභාවේ නිර්දේශකරු කතානායකතුමා.
You as a speaker can invite the Attorney General to examine this and refer it to the Criminal Investigation Department or the Commission on Bribery and Corruption because this has serious implications.
Horizon Campus 2024 intake. Register now.
Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe says that if Sri Lanka's import-dependent economy is not transformed into an export-oriented one, the country will continue to accrue more debt, leading it into another crisis within 15 years. The head of state made this statement during the inauguration of the newly constructed second and third phases of the Bingiriya Export Processing Zone. State Minister of Investment Promotion Dilum Amunugama, who joined the President at the inauguration ceremony, revealed that plans are underway to construct several new investment zones as part of the government's export promotion initiative.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe today inaugurated the second and third phases of the Bingiriya Export Processing Zone, the largest of its kind in Sri Lanka. The President also inaugurated the newly constructed factory of Dongjia Industrial and Commerce Company Limited, located within the Export Processing Zone. Following the inauguration ceremony, President Wickremesinghe held discussions with officials from the Board of Investment, the Urban Development Authority, investors and entrepreneurs.
With the inauguration of the second and third phases of this project, the Bingiriya Export Processing Zone will span a total of 1,000 acres. Not only that, plans are underway to transform the whole area from here to Chilau into an economic zone. Further, we intend to create more investment zones in the Iranavila, Kappalthurai, Mankulam, Kankasanturai and Parantan areas. Starting from January this year, we have entered into agreements with around 35 investors. The target given to the Ministry of Investment Promotion by the Ministry of Finance was to bring in $1 billion worth of investment within this year. I am happy to report that the value of those 35 investments alone are close to $1 billion.
I believed that we could emerge out of bankruptcy before the end of this year. Our goal was to achieve that by August. However, we managed to achieve it by June. Further, we received around $8 billion worth of relief on our debt, and debt repayments have been postponed. We have emerged out of bankruptcy and we can start to repay our debt. However, we have not progressed beyond that. Our expenditure on imports remain higher than our export income. Although we have until 2043 to start repayments on our current debt, at the current rate, we will have to accrue more debt in the meantime. If this cycle continues, we will fall into another crisis in 15 years' time. Therefore, we must first control the country's debt. If we violate the conditions of the agreements with our creditors, we will not receive any further concessions. Secondly, our economy must be converted into an export-oriented one within the next 10 years. Countries such as Vietnam, Thailand and Malaysia achieved that, and so can we. This is our responsibility, and we are in the process of creating that economy. At a recent media briefing, the IMF was queried on its stance regarding the restructuring of Sri Lanka's international sovereign bonds. Responding to the concerns raised, the communication director of the International Monetary Fund reaffirmed that reform efforts are bearing fruit in Sri Lanka and went on to highlight that the IMF's opinion on the restructuring of international sovereign bonds will be communicated at the end of its official assessment on the matter. Those comments by the IMF come off the back of solid economic footing secured by Sri Lanka at the other end of a successful IMF second review, which disbursed $336 million to the national coffers.
We, of course, have taken note of the new developments with respect to the discussions on debt, and our team is in the process of assessing the agreed terms of the debt restructuring and whether they're consistent with the parameters of our program. So once that assessment is complete, we'll be able to communicate our views on that. But of course, it's important. It's a very important step for Sri Lanka.
Meanwhile, Director of the Communications Department of the International Monetary Fund, Julie Kozak, responded to a question raised on the ongoing strikes launched demanding increments to the salaries of state sector workers.
We do understand, and it's very important to recognize how difficult the situation in Sri Lanka has been over the past few years. They've been very challenging for the people of Sri Lanka, and the country does continue to face some very complex policy trade-offs. And this is particularly the case when it comes to debt and the fiscal position. So restoring fiscal and debt sustainability is critical for the Sri Lankan economy to emerge from the crisis and to avoid returning to a situation like it faced in 2022. And of course, they're also essential to lay the foundation for robust and sustainable growth and job creation. The government does need to, of course, have the resources in order to pay its bills. And that means ensuring that taxes are paid by those who can most afford to pay them. Efforts in this direction include improving tax administration, limiting the size of tax exemptions, and finally, let me emphasize that the program includes measures to protect the poor and the vulnerable. It has a strong focus on anti-corruption and good governance to mitigate the impact of the reforms on vulnerable segments of society, and also to ensure that the hard-won gains from the reform efforts ultimately benefit all of the people of Sri Lanka.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa claims that the Sri Lankan education system must evolve beyond outdated learning methods, which includes rote learning. Speaking at the 309th iteration of the Sakwala program in Borella, he further asserts that the Sakwala program breathes new life to the country's education system, which, according to the opposition leader, is on the verge of collapse.
The 309th edition of the Sakwala program was held at Susamebadana College in Borella under the patronage of opposition leader Sajith Premadasa.
The foundation of this program consists transparency, trust, incorruptibility, honesty, accountability and responsibility. The aim of donating smart classrooms under the Sakwala program is to contribute to building a smarter country. A critical change should be made to this country's education system. Rote learning and other outdated learning methods are not suitable for the country or the world. Parents struggle to provide proper education to their children. Respect your elders. Be humble. Be the foundation of a polite, civilized and smart generation. We must proceed along a good path. Through the concept of smart classrooms, we breathe new life into an education system which is on the verge of collapse.
Now, Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna MP SB Disanayake emphasized that the primary responsibility of the SLPP is to fully support the incumbent president in his bid to reclaim his office in the upcoming presidential election. With that, let's take a look at the latest developments in the political space.
As a bankrupt nation, we are now actively engaged in the process of rebuilding and developing our nation. Whoever takes over Sri Lanka's governance should not change its policies. That is why President Ranil Wickremesinghe established a national committee to discuss ideas in Parliament. He also emphasized the importance of confronting reality and avoiding falsehoods.
Some politicians claim that Sajith Premadasa avoided responsibility during the crisis and because of that, he doesn't have the right to run for office. Can one person alone govern this country? There is no law as such. Only the people of this country have the authority to decide who should be elected. No one else can take that decision.
As the president, Ranil Wickremesinghe nominated 90 members of the SJB as reliable allies. They have been offered sums of money from 50 million rupees up to 100 million rupees before dispersing such sums to MPs of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. Since they have also been promised various perks, they are eagerly awaiting to cross over to the government.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe took over the country and turned its course around within the span of 2 years. We overcame the hardships of 2022 because of the policies he made. If we discontinue this program, we will revert to the crisis that we experienced in 2022. People should decide whether they want to discontinue this internationally recognized program or if they want to move forward while developing this country.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe is committed to maintain a secure environment for both foreign and local investors to confidently invest in our country. Our main responsibility as the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna is to support the incumbent president to reclaim his position in the upcoming election.
Now, Director General of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, Audrey Azoulay, has accepted the Sri Lankan government's invitation to embark on an official visit to the island. Accordingly, the UNESCO Director General will visit Sri Lanka from the 16th to the 19th of July, marking her first official visit to the island nation. During a visit, Director General Azoulay will call on President Ranil Wickremesinghe, Minister of Education Susil Premajayantha, as well as State Minister of Foreign Affairs Tharaka Balasurya. She will also take part in the celebration of the 75th anniversary of Sri Lanka's membership of UNESCO and embark on a tour of Sri Lanka's UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And now let's take a look at some local news in brief.
An individual with a stash of narcotics in his possession was arrested in Yatyanthara this morning during a raid carried out under the Yukti special operation launched to curb the island-wide spread of narcotic substances. The suspect in question had a stash of crystal methamphetamine in his possession at the time of the arrest. The Yatyanthara police were able to seize 14 packets of crystal methamphetamine, tools used for the packing process and 2 mobile phones during the arrest. In Inguria, meanwhile, 2 persons were arrested for allegedly being involved in large-scale liquor production within a residence rented out for a monthly rate of 25,000 rupees. 154,000 millilitres of moonshine stored in 10 barrels, 7,500 millilitres of other illicit liquor, along with equipment used to produce such liquor, were seized by the Inguria police. In other local news, a cab belonging to the Over Provincial Department of Education collided with a motorcycle at the 5th milestone area on the Badulla Mahayangane main road. 2 individuals aged 18 and 20 on the motorcycle and the driver of the cab sustained injuries during the incident. The wounded were promptly admitted to the Badulla Teaching Hospital for treatment.
Star Dishwasher Dali Hell Indul Pahasuwen Sede Star Dishwasher Magic Tub එක.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
Welcome back. Now, the Colombo Stock Exchange closed in green today to round off the week with turnover crossing 653 million rupees. The CSE share price index climbed 0.35% to settle at 11,843.97 points, while the S&P Sri Lanka 20 rose by 0.56% to close at 3,454.68 points. During the week, the ASPI lost 0.9%, while the S&P Sri Lanka 20 fell 1.5% within an average daily turnover of 627 million rupees. Trading volume on the ASPI climbed to 20.7 million shares from 17.6 million shares in the previous session. The capital goods sector was the top contributor to the market turnover, while the food and beverage tobacco sector came in second. Foreign investors closed as net sellers of floating stocks worth 138.9 million rupees, while domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing shares worth 615.7 million rupees. And now let's take a look at some corporate news in brief.
In a bid to address the urgent need for reforms in Sri Lanka's agriculture sector, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce hosted a consultation mission from the Asian Development Bank. The mission aims to prepare an investment project to bolster Sri Lanka's agribusiness sector through targeted investments, technical support and policy reforms. The Ceylon Chamber of Commerce brought together key stakeholders in the agriculture ecosystem to consult with the ADB mission on the scope and implementation arrangements of the proposed project, which aims to support agriculture value chain financing and commercialization. Meanwhile, NDB was honoured as the Technology Resilient Company of the Year 2024 under the Banking Local category at the Digital Trust Awards 2024 organised by Information Systems Audit and Control Association or ISACA. The Sri Lanka chapter of the ISACA inaugurated the Digital Trust Award to acknowledge organisations that have demonstrated exceptional performance in information security. In other corporate news, Prime Health Herbal Products, a herbal nutraceutical manufacturer, received the award for Best Herbal Innovation in Cancer Control and Prevention at the Business World International Awards organised by the Business World International Organisation. PHHP specializes in researching and developing pharmaceutical and nutraceutical products with a strong focus on addressing non-infectious diseases such as cancer, diabetes, obesity and coronary diseases. Their research and development facility collaborates closely with esteemed local institutions including the universities of Peradeniya, Kalaniya and Ruhuna, while also partnering with international institutions such as leading universities in Australia, Japan and Spain.
That's all the news we have for you tonight. Thank you. Have a great night.